The Cleveland Browns didn't expect this season's biggest battle to begin before Week 1, but that's exactly where they find themselves. What was supposed to be a routine quarterback competition has turned into one of the most closely watched storylines in the entire NFL. Every practice, every rep, and every comment from the coaching staff is being dissected by fans and analysts searching for clues about where this franchise is really headed. And the deeper you look, the clearer it becomes that this isn't simply about choosing the starting quarterback. It's about choosing the direction of the organization itself. At the center of the storm are two completely different futures. On one side is Deshaun Watson, the veteran quarterback carrying one of the largest guaranteed contracts in NFL history and representing a massive investment by the Browns front office. On the other is rookie Shedeur Sanders, whose arrival has energized a huge portion of the fan base and sparked endless conversations about whether Cleveland's future should begin sooner rather than later. The contrast couldn't be greater, and with training camp approaching, the pressure is only continuing to build. Recent reports and comments from Browns insiders have only added fuel to the conversation. While Cleveland has publicly maintained that every quarterback will have an opportunity to compete, speculation about possible outcomes has spread across sports media and social platforms. Some fans believe Shedeur should be given every chance to earn the job immediately. Others argue that development takes time and that rushing the process could do more harm than good. Meanwhile, rumors about possible trade scenarios continue to circulate online, even though there has been no verified indication that the Browns are actively shopping Sanders. The uncertainty has created an atmosphere where every headline seems bigger than the last. What's making this situation even more fascinating is that the debate has moved far beyond football. It's become a conversation about expectations, pressure, public perception, and whether an NFL franchise can balance its long-term future with the realities of an expensive commitment already on its roster. Every decision Cleveland makes from this point forward will be analyzed from every angle, because the stakes are no longer limited to one season. They're tied to the reputation of the front office, the coaching staff, and the direction of the franchise for years to come. And that's where today's story takes an unexpected turn. Behind all the headlines, fan reactions, and social media debates is one overlooked factor that could end up deciding everything. It's a detail that doesn't receive nearly as much attention as the quarterback battle itself, yet it may ultimately determine whether the Browns move forward with stability or find themselves facing one of the most difficult decisions in recent franchise history. By the end of this video, you'll understand why so many people around the league are watching Cleveland more closely than ever, and why the biggest surprise may still be ahead. The closer the Cleveland Browns get to training camp, the more obvious it becomes that this quarterback battle has outgrown football. Every franchise goes through position competitions, but very few become the center of the NFL conversation before a single meaningful snap has been played. That's exactly what's happening in Cleveland. Every practice report becomes a headline. Every throw's clipped and shared across social media. Every comment from head coach Kevin Stefanski or general manager Andrew Berry is analyzed as if it contains a hidden message. What should have been a routine evaluation process has evolved into one of the most fascinating storylines in professional football. The Browns continue to insist that every quarterback will earn his opportunities on the field. Publicly, the organization has emphasized competition, preparation, and letting performance determine the depth chart. That message sounds straightforward enough, but outside the building, very few people believe the situation is that simple. The reason is obvious. This isn't just about choosing the player who gives Cleveland the best chance to win a football game. It's about balancing years of financial investment, public expectations, and the future of the franchise all at the same time. Deshaun Watson remains one of the biggest question marks in the NFL. After Cleveland committed historic resources to acquire him, the organization expected him to become the face of a championship contender. Instead, injuries and inconsistent performances have prevented that vision from becoming reality. Every season that passes without Watson returning to his previous level only increases the pressure on everyone involved. The Browns cannot simply ignore what they've invested, but they also can't ignore what fans are seeing on the field. That tension has created an environment where every quarterback decision carries consequences far beyond Sunday's final score. Then there's Shedeur Sanders, whose arrival has injected a completely different kind of energy into the organization. Even before participating in regular season action, he's become one of the most talked about rookies in football. His confidence, college resume, and recognizable last name have made him one of the league's biggest attractions. Every practice highlight spreads across the internet within minutes, and every positive report sparks another wave of debate about how quickly he should get an opportunity. Whether that's fair or not, it's the reality Cleveland now has to manage. The excitement surrounding Sanders isn't based solely on his famous surname. Many fans see him as a symbol of possibility. Whenever a franchise has struggled to find long-term stability at quarterback, supporters naturally gravitate toward whoever represents hope for the future. That's why every accurate deep ball during off-season workouts creates another round of excitement. Every encouraging observation from teammates or coaches fuels even more optimism. Expectations begin growing long before regular season games ever begin, and eventually those expectations become almost impossible to control. Inside the locker room, however, the challenge is very different. Veteran players care about one thing above everything else: winning football games. Coaches want consistency, preparation, and leadership. The front office wants to protect both its current investment and its long-term future. Those priorities don't always point in the same direction, which is why this competition feels so much larger than simply naming a starter. Every decision affects team chemistry, media attention, fan confidence, and the organization's credibility moving forward. Adding even more intrigue is the non-stop conversation happening outside team headquarters. Television analysts debate the quarterback room almost daily. Former NFL players offer conflicting opinions. Social media has turned every practice clip into evidence supporting one side or the other. Some believe Watson deserves the opportunity to prove he can return to form after dealing with injuries. Others argue that if Sanders consistently impresses during camp and preseason, the Browns should prioritize the future instead of looking backward. Neither side is likely to change its mind anytime soon, which means the pressure surrounding every preseason snap will only continue to grow. Perhaps the most difficult part for Cleveland is that perception often becomes just as important as reality. Even if the coaching staff believes they're making football decisions based strictly on performance, millions of fans will interpret those choices through completely different lenses. Every interception, every touchdown pass, every missed read, and every successful drive will immediately become part of a much larger debate about where this franchise is headed. In today's NFL, managing public expectations can sometimes become nearly as challenging as managing the roster itself. And that's what makes the weeks ahead so important. The Browns aren't simply evaluating quarterbacks, they're trying to determine the identity of their team moving forward. Every practice and every preseason game brings them one step closer to a decision that could shape the franchise for years. But as complicated as this quarterback competition already seems, another layer of uncertainty has quietly emerged behind the scenes, and that's where the story becomes even more unpredictable. Just when it seemed like the quarterback competition couldn't get any bigger, the conversation took another unexpected turn. Suddenly, social media was flooded with trade proposals, sports talk shows were debating hypothetical landing spots, and fans were asking the same question: could the Browns actually move Shedeur Sanders before he ever becomes their starter? It sounded unbelievable at first, but the discussion didn't appear out of nowhere. Instead, it grew from a combination of insider commentary, fan speculation, and the unique circumstances surrounding Cleveland's quarterback room. One of the biggest reasons these rumors gained momentum was the way Browns insiders described the team's situation. During several off-season discussions, respected reporters, including Mary Kay Cabot, explained that Cleveland's priority is still to let the quarterback competition play out rather than rushing toward any major decision. She also noted that if another quarterback clearly wins the job, the Browns would likely listen if other teams called, but that is very different from actively trying to trade Shedeur Sanders. That distinction is important because much of the internet quickly transformed the possibility of taking phone calls into claims that a trade was already being planned. That's where the story became far more complicated. In today's NFL, simply saying a team might answer the phone is enough to launch thousands of online theories. Fans began creating mock trades, analysts started ranking possible destinations, every quarterback-needy franchise suddenly became part of the conversation. Before long, teams like the Raiders, Saints, and even a handful of surprise contenders were being mentioned across social media as possible landing spots. Most of those ideas weren't based on confirmed reporting, they were built on speculation, fueled by one simple question. If Shedeur isn't starting, would another team try to acquire him?
The timing only made those conversations louder. Cleveland entered the offseason with multiple quarterbacks competing for opportunities, creating one of the league's most unusual depth charts. Whenever a team has more quarterbacks than available starting jobs, rival front offices naturally pay attention. General managers across the NFL constantly monitor situations where talented players might become available unexpectedly. That doesn't mean negotiations are happening behind closed doors, but it does mean executives are always gathering information in case circumstances change later in the preseason. Another factor driving the rumors is Shedeur himself. Unlike most rookie quarterbacks, he entered the league with an enormous national following. Thanks to his college career, his confidence, and the spotlight surrounding the Sanders family, nearly every development involving him generates headlines. A routine practice highlight that might go unnoticed for another rookie can become national news within hours. That level of attention creates an entirely different media environment, where ordinary off-season developments are often magnified into much bigger stories than they otherwise would be. Fans have also contributed to the growing speculation. Every positive report from organized practice activities or minicamp has been met with excitement from supporters who believe Shedeur represents the Browns' future. At the same time, others argue that patience is essential for any young quarterback entering the NFL. Those opposing viewpoints have created non-stop debate online, with each side interpreting every report in a completely different way. One encouraging practice becomes proof that he's ready to start immediately. Another quiet day becomes evidence that Cleveland should consider moving him elsewhere. The reality usually falls somewhere in the middle, but balanced opinions rarely spread as quickly as dramatic headlines. Then there's another layer that often gets overlooked. Rival teams don't make personnel decisions based on social media trends. They evaluate talent, contracts, and long-term value. If a young quarterback shows promise while sitting behind an established veteran, it's perfectly reasonable for other organizations to monitor the situation. That doesn't mean offers are being exchanged or deals are close. It simply reflects how NFL front offices operate. Smart organizations prepare for every possibility, even if those possibilities never materialize. Reports suggesting the Browns could receive inquiries have therefore been interpreted in very different ways. Some observers see it as nothing more than standard off-season business. Others believe it's the beginning of something much bigger. Until Cleveland actually makes a decision, both perspectives remain exactly what they are, opinions based on incomplete information. The Browns have consistently maintained that the competition remains open, and there has been no verified indication that the organization has decided to move Sanders before seeing how training camp unfolds. Still, once trade rumors enter the conversation, they rarely disappear. Every preseason throw, every depth chart update, and every press conference will now be viewed through that lens. One strong performance could reignite speculation within minutes, while one disappointing outing could shift the narrative just as quickly. That's the reality of today's NFL, where information travels faster than ever, and perception often becomes its own storyline. But as fascinating as these rumors have become, they're still overshadowed by the issue Cleveland simply cannot escape. Because regardless of what fans, analysts, or rival teams are saying, one contract continues to shape every decision the Browns make, and it's impossible to understand this quarterback battle without looking at the staggering investment that changed the franchise's future. For all the excitement surrounding Shedeur Sanders and the endless debate about Cleveland's quarterback competition, there is one reality the Browns simply cannot escape. It isn't a highlight from minicamp, it isn't a viral social media clip, and it isn't even the trade rumors dominating sports talk. The biggest obstacle standing in the middle of every decision the organization makes is a contract worth approximately $230 million fully guaranteed. Whether fans like it or not, that investment continues to shape almost every conversation taking place inside the building. When the Browns traded for Deshaun Watson, they weren't making a short-term gamble. They believed they had found the franchise quarterback who could finally change the direction of a team that had spent decades searching for stability at the most important position in sports. The fully guaranteed contract wasn't just a financial commitment, it was a declaration that Cleveland was prepared to build its future around Watson for years to come. At the time, it was viewed as one of the boldest moves any NFL franchise had ever made. But football rarely follows the script teams expect. Injuries, inconsistent play, and constant scrutiny have prevented that vision from becoming reality. Instead of talking about playoff runs and championship windows, much of the discussion surrounding Watson has focused on whether he can return to the level that once made him an elite quarterback. Every season without a clear answer has only increased the pressure on the front office, the coaching staff, and Watson himself.
That pressure creates a problem few organizations ever have to face. If Watson returns to form, Cleveland can justify its investment and finally move forward with confidence. But if his struggles continue while another quarterback begins generating excitement behind him, every decision suddenly becomes far more complicated. It's no longer just about choosing who gives the team the best chance to win this week's game. It's about balancing competitive football decisions with one of the largest financial commitments in NFL history. This is where the Browns find themselves walking an incredibly difficult line. Kevin Stefanski and his coaching staff are responsible for putting the best possible team on the field every Sunday. Andrew Berry in the front office must also think about the long-term health of the franchise, salary cap implications, and organizational stability. Those responsibilities don't always point in the same direction. A coach naturally wants immediate results, while executives have to consider years of planning and investment. When both priorities collide, simple decisions suddenly become incredibly complicated. Fans, of course, don't evaluate the situation through salary cap spreadsheets or contract structures. They care about one thing above everything else: winning football games. If they believe another quarterback gives Cleveland a better chance to succeed, they'll naturally call for change regardless of how much money has already been committed. That's why every conversation about Watson eventually circles back to the same uncomfortable reality. The contract may explain why the Browns remain patient, but it doesn't automatically convince supporters who simply want to see victories on Sundays. Former players and analysts have repeatedly pointed out that NFL teams cannot allow financial investments alone to dictate football decisions forever. At some point, production on the field has to become the deciding factor. Exactly when that point arrives is what makes Cleveland's situation so fascinating. Some believe Watson deserves every opportunity to prove he can regain his previous form after dealing with injuries. Others argue that if another quarterback clearly outperforms him during camp and preseason, delaying change only postpones the inevitable. Both arguments have gained traction, making this one of the most closely watched quarterback situations in the league. Meanwhile, every positive report involving Shedeur Sanders naturally increases the spotlight on Watson. That's not necessarily because Sanders is expected to start immediately, but because hope has a way of changing expectations. Whenever a promising young quarterback begins showing signs of development, comparisons become unavoidable. Fans begin imagining what the future could look like. Analysts start discussing possible timelines. Suddenly, the veteran is not just competing against opposing defenses, he's competing against the possibility of what's next.
Perhaps the greatest challenge for Cleveland is avoiding emotional decision-making in either direction. If Watson performs well, the organization can continue building around its original plan. If he struggles while another quarterback shines, the pressure from outside the building will become impossible to ignore. Every incomplete pass, every turnover, and every difficult loss will likely reignite conversations that have already dominated the offseason. That's simply the reality of playing quarterback in today's NFL, especially when expectations are this high. Still, inside the Browns facility, the message has remained remarkably consistent. The coaching staff has emphasized competition, preparation, and earning opportunities, rather than making decisions based on outside noise. Whether that approach holds up once preseason games begin remains one of the biggest unanswered questions of the summer, because practice reports can only tell part of the story. Eventually, performances under the lights will carry far more weight than off-season speculation. And that's exactly why the next phase of this story could change everything. While most of the attention has focused on Deshaun Watson's contract and the endless trade speculation, another story has been quietly unfolding throughout the offseason. While headlines continue to focus on controversy, coaches and observers have been paying attention to something much simpler. Shedeur Sanders has steadily improved every time he has stepped onto the practice field. No one inside the Browns organization has declared him the future starter, but it's becoming increasingly difficult to ignore the momentum building around the rookie quarterback. One of the biggest reasons for that momentum is consistency. During organized team activities and minicamp, reports from local media described a quarterback who looked increasingly comfortable as practices progressed. Like most rookies, Sanders experienced expected growing pains while adjusting to an NFL playbook and the speed of professional defenses, but multiple observers noted that his confidence appeared to increase with each passing week. Instead of pressing after mistakes, he reportedly settled into the offense and began making quicker decisions, something coaches always want to see from a young quarterback entering his first professional season. That development may not sound dramatic, but inside an NFL building, it's one of the most encouraging signs possible. Physical talent can get a player drafted, but the ability to absorb coaching, process information quickly, and improve from one practice to the next often determines whether a quarterback earns long-term opportunities. Every rookie enters the league with impressive college highlights. Far fewer demonstrate visible progress in a matter of weeks. That's why positive practice reports have generated so much optimism among Browns supporters. Another factor helping Sanders is his approach. Throughout his football career, he has carried himself with confidence, but teammates and coaches have also spoken about his willingness to learn. Rather than trying to prove he already has every answer, he appears focused on understanding the offense, building chemistry with receivers, and adapting to the expectations of the NFL. That mindset matters because Cleveland isn't asking him to recreate what he did in college overnight. They're evaluating whether he can eventually lead an offense at the highest level of the sport. The excitement surrounding Sanders isn't coming only from inside the practice facility. Fans have embraced him from the moment he arrived in Cleveland. His jersey quickly became one of the team's most talked about merchandise items. His practice highlights consistently attract millions of views online, and every appearance seems to generate another wave of discussion across football media. Some of that attention comes from his last name and the spotlight surrounding the Sanders family, but much of it comes from simple curiosity. Browns fans have spent years searching for long-term stability at quarterback, so whenever a promising young player flashes potential, hope naturally follows. Social media has only amplified that enthusiasm. Every accurate deep throw, every well-timed scramble, and every positive report from practice spreads across the internet within minutes. While experienced fans understand that off-season workouts don't guarantee regular season success, they also recognize that development has to begin somewhere. For many supporters, seeing Sanders make visible progress during his first NFL offseason is enough to believe that his ceiling could be even higher once meaningful games begin. Of course, it's equally important to keep those reports in perspective. Coaches evaluate much more than highlight throws. They study footwork, decision-making, command of the huddle, understanding of protections, and the ability to respond after mistakes. Those are details that rarely appear in viral clips, but often determine who earns playing time. That's why Cleveland has remained careful not to rush expectations. Public excitement is one thing, organizational evaluation is something different. Still, there have been enough encouraging signs to keep the conversation alive. Former players and analysts have commented on Sanders' poise, his willingness to attack downfield when opportunities present themselves, and his confidence in high-pressure situations. None of those qualities guarantee immediate success, but together they paint the picture of a quarterback who appears comfortable embracing the challenge rather than shrinking from it. For a rookie entering one of the league's most heavily scrutinized quarterback rooms, that's an encouraging trait to possess. Perhaps the most interesting part of Sanders' offseason isn't any single throw or practice report. It's how the conversation around him has gradually changed. Early in the offseason, much of the discussion centered on his draft position and how quickly he could adapt to the NFL. Now, more people are asking how high his long-term ceiling might actually be. That's a subtle but meaningful shift. It suggests that the narrative is moving away from whether he belongs in the league and toward how soon he could become an impact player if his development continues. The Browns know better than anyone that momentum can disappear just as quickly as it arrives. Training camp will present tougher competition, preseason games will introduce real pressure, and every quarterback will be judged far more closely once the lights come on. But for now, Sanders has accomplished something that isn't easy for any rookie. He has given both coaches and fans legitimate reasons to believe his progress is real. The challenge now is proving that those encouraging signs can continue when the stakes become significantly higher. And that's where Cleveland faces perhaps its toughest decision yet. Developing a talented young quarterback is one thing. Finding the right role for him while balancing veterans, expectations, and one of the most closely watched quarterback rooms in football is something entirely different. Because as Sanders' momentum continues to grow, another question becomes impossible to ignore. Can the Browns realistically keep everyone happy if he isn't the one under center? At first glance, the answer seems simple. NFL teams carry multiple quarterbacks every season, so why couldn't the Browns do the same? Keep the veteran, continue developing the rookie, and let the competition play out naturally. On paper, that sounds like the safest path forward, but the deeper you examine Cleveland's situation, the more you realize this isn't an ordinary quarterback room. Every player brings a different level of expectation, and every decision the coaching staff makes will be magnified under one of the brightest spotlights in football.
The biggest challenge isn't necessarily inside the locker room, it's everything happening outside of it. Every week brings another wave of opinions from television analysts, former players, beat reporters, and millions of fans online. If Watson starts and performs well, much of the debate quiets down, but if he struggles, even briefly, calls for Shedeur Sanders will likely grow louder. That's not unique to Cleveland. It's the reality for almost every team with a highly regarded young quarterback waiting behind an established veteran. The difference is that very few backups arrive with the national attention Sanders already commands. Imagine the scenario. It's the middle of the regular season, the Browns are fighting to stay in the playoff race, and the offense has a difficult afternoon. The next morning, sports shows begin asking whether it's time for a change. Social media fills with clips of Sanders from preseason or practice. Fans begin debating every coaching decision, and the conversation shifts from fixing the offense to changing quarterbacks. Even if the coaching staff remains completely united behind its starter, the outside noise becomes impossible to avoid. That's why so many observers believe communication will be one of Kevin Stefanski's biggest responsibilities this season. Quarterback competitions don't end the moment a starter is announced. In many ways, that's when the real challenge begins. The coaching staff must convince the entire roster that every decision is based on performance, preparation, and what's best for the team. Players notice everything. They see who earns first-team reps, who responds during meetings, and who performs when the pressure rises. Maintaining confidence throughout the roster is every bit as important as choosing the right quarterback. Then there's Shedeur Sanders' own development. Young quarterbacks typically benefit from learning behind experienced veterans before eventually taking over. Many successful NFL careers have followed that exact path. Patrick Mahomes, Aaron Rodgers, and several others spent valuable time developing before becoming full-time starters. Supporters of a patient approach argue that Sanders doesn't need to play immediately to become successful. Instead, they believe another season of learning could accelerate his long-term growth without forcing him into difficult situations before he's completely ready. Others see the situation differently. They argue that football ultimately rewards production, not timelines. If Sanders consistently demonstrates that he's ready to compete at the highest level, delaying his opportunity simply because he's a rookie could prevent the team from putting its best lineup on the field. Again, these are opinions rather than established facts, but they illustrate just how divided the conversation has become. The Browns also have to consider the human side of the equation. Every quarterback wants to play. Competitors don't spend their entire lives chasing the NFL just to become comfortable holding a clipboard. Sanders has repeatedly shown confidence throughout his football career, and like any young player, he'll want every opportunity to prove himself. At the same time, Watson is fighting to demonstrate that he can still perform at the level Cleveland expected when they acquired him. Both quarterbacks have every reason to believe they belong on the field, which naturally increases the importance of every practice and every preseason snap. Perhaps the most interesting aspect of this competition is that no one outside the Browns facility truly knows how close it is. Fans only see practice highlights and hear selected comments from coaches and reporters. Inside the building, the evaluation is far more detailed. Coaches grade every throw, every read, every adjustment at the line of scrimmage, and every decision under pressure. Those details rarely become public, which is why so much speculation fills the information gap. The less people know, the easier it becomes for theories to spread. That uncertainty also explains why trade discussions continue appearing whenever the quarterback room is mentioned. Some believe keeping both players creates healthy competition that pushes everyone to improve. Others argue that if another team presents a compelling offer for a quarterback who isn't expected to start immediately, Cleveland would at least have to evaluate the proposal. At this point, there is no verified indication that the Browns are planning such a move, but as long as the depth chart remains unsettled, the conversation is unlikely to disappear. Ultimately, Cleveland's goal was much simpler than the headlines suggest. The organization wants the quarterback that gives the team the best chance to win both now and in the future. The difficulty lies in determining when those two objectives point in the same direction and when they don't. Until that answer becomes obvious on the field, every practice, every preseason drive, and every roster decision will continue fueling debate across the NFL. But if the quarterback competition has already generated this much discussion, the internet has taken things even further. Beyond the reports from respected insiders, an entirely different world of rumors, fan theories, and blockbuster trade scenarios has emerged online. Some of those ideas are realistic, others are almost certainly not. Yet together, they've created another fascinating chapter in one of football's most talked about stories. If you thought the debate surrounding Cleveland's quarterback room was intense, the internet has taken it to an entirely different level. Every day seems to bring a new blockbuster proposal, another viral rumor, or a fan-generated trade package that promises to reshape the Browns overnight. In today's NFL, it doesn't take much for speculation to spread. One comment from a reporter, one practice observation, or one anonymous opinion online can quickly snowball into a headline that millions of people treat as if a deal is already being negotiated. The most common theory making the rounds is surprisingly straightforward. Some fans believe that if Shedeur Sanders isn't projected to start in the near future, another quarterback-needy franchise could eventually inquire about his availability. That's a reasonable football discussion because NFL teams routinely monitor talented young players across the league. However, there's an important distinction that often gets lost online. Monitoring a player's situation is not the same as negotiating a trade.
and there has been no verified report that Cleveland is actively shopping Sanders. Yet, that hasn't stopped countless hypothetical scenarios from appearing across social media. One of the most common teams mentioned by fans is the Raiders. Supporters of that idea argue that if Las Vegas were still searching for long-term quarterback stability, a young player with Sanders' upside would naturally become an attractive target. Others have suggested franchises that could experience injuries or disappointing quarterback play during the season might eventually explore every available option. These conversations are based almost entirely on hypothetical situations rather than confirmed information, but they demonstrate just how quickly public imagination can take over once uncertainty enters the picture. Another popular theory centers on the possibility of a surprise team entering the conversation. Every NFL season brings unexpected developments. A starting quarterback gets injured, a highly drafted rookie struggles earlier than expected, a playoff contender suddenly realizes it needs a better long-term plan at the position. When those situations arise, front offices sometimes make aggressive moves that few people predicted months ago. That's why some analysts have suggested it would be unwise to completely dismiss the possibility of future phone calls if circumstances around the league change. Again, that's speculation about what could happen, not reporting that anything is currently happening. Then there are the trade packages themselves, and this is where the internet truly becomes creative. Every week, fans build elaborate proposals involving draft picks, veteran players, future selections, and salary cap calculations. Some packages would heavily favor Cleveland, others would overwhelmingly benefit the team receiving Sanders. A few were so unrealistic that they exist purely to spark debate. While these mock trades rarely reflect actual negotiations inside NFL front offices, they reveal just how valuable many fans believe Sanders could become if his development continues on its current path. Another rumor that has generated significant discussion involves Deshaun Sanders. Because of the close relationship between father and son, some people online have speculated that Coach Prime could eventually prefer Shedeur to play elsewhere if opportunities in Cleveland became limited. It's a storyline that frequently gains attention on social media, but it's important to separate speculation from evidence. There has been no verified reporting confirming that Deshaun Sanders is pressuring the Browns to move his son or privately pushing for a trade. The conversation exists primarily because of public curiosity surrounding one of football's most recognizable families, not because of confirmed actions behind the scenes. The fascination surrounding these rumors also says something about today's sports culture. Fans no longer wait for official announcements before debating major roster moves. Every podcast, live stream, and social media account contributes another layer to the discussion. Artificial trade machines, salary cap simulations, and endless online polls have transformed the offseason into a non-stop guessing game. Sometimes those predictions turn out to be surprisingly accurate. Other times, they disappear as quickly as they emerged. Either way, they keep the conversation alive long before meaningful football games begin. Interestingly, the Browns themselves have done very little to fuel these theories. Publicly, the organization has maintained a consistent message throughout the offseason. Coaches have emphasized competition. Executives have avoided discussing hypothetical trades. The focus remains on evaluating every quarterback throughout training camp and preseason before making important decisions. Yet, the lack of definitive answers has only encouraged more speculation. In the absence of certainty, fans naturally create their own narratives. That's also why every preseason game carries extra significance. A strong performance from Sanders could immediately reignite conversations about his future, while a difficult outing might temporarily quiet some of the speculation. The same applies to the other quarterbacks in Cleveland's room. Every drive will be viewed not only as an evaluation of individual performance, but also as another clue in a much larger puzzle that fans have been trying to solve for months. Perhaps the biggest lesson from all these internet theories is that they reflect just how much interest surrounds Sanders as a player. Teams don't become the subject of constant trade discussions unless people believe they possess valuable talent. Whether those conversations ever evolve into something real remains impossible to predict. For now, they remain exactly what they are: interesting possibilities discussed by fans and analysts rather than confirmed plans inside the Cleveland front office.
Still, speculation can only last for so long before reality takes over. Eventually, training camp ends, preseason concludes, and Cleveland will have to make decisions that affect not only this season, but potentially the next several years. At that point, every rumor will give way to one simple question: which quarterback gives the Browns their best chance to compete, and what does that decision say about the future of the franchise? As training camp moves closer and preseason games begin to carry real meaning, the Browns are approaching a decision that could shape the organization for years to come. This is no longer just another off-season storyline built around quarterback rankings and practice highlights. It's a defining moment for a franchise that has spent decades searching for long-term stability under center. Whatever Cleveland decides over the coming weeks won't simply determine who takes the first snap of the season, it will reveal how the organization sees its future. If Deshaun Watson wins the starting job and performs at the level the Browns envisioned when they traded for him, many of today's debates could disappear almost overnight. Winning has a way of changing public opinion faster than anything else in professional sports. Strong performances would validate the coaching staff's patience, reduce questions surrounding the massive investment in Watson, and allow the Browns to continue developing their younger quarterbacks without the pressure of making an immediate change. From the organization's perspective, that's probably the cleanest outcome because it aligns with the long-term plan they committed to when they made one of the boldest trades in franchise history. But football rarely unfolds according to the cleanest script. If Deshaun Watson struggles during the regular season, the pressure surrounding every decision will increase dramatically. Every difficult offensive performance will likely reignite conversations about whether the Browns should look toward the future. Fans won't simply judge Watson by his own statistics. They'll inevitably compare every drive to the potential represented by the quarterbacks waiting behind him. That's the reality of having a highly discussed young prospect on the roster. Fair or unfair, comparisons become unavoidable. Then there's the possibility that Shedeur Sanders continues developing at an even faster pace than expected. Coaches have consistently emphasized that every player must earn opportunities through performance, and preseason games will provide the first meaningful chance for fans to see how each quarterback responds in live NFL action. If Sanders continues showing progress while handling the speed and complexity of professional defenses, excitement surrounding his future will naturally continue growing. That doesn't automatically mean he becomes the starter, but it does mean the conversation becomes increasingly difficult to ignore. There's also a third scenario that receives far less attention but may ultimately be the most realistic. What if no quarterback completely separates himself during camp? What if Watson shows encouraging signs while Sanders demonstrates clear long-term potential? In that case, Cleveland could enter the regular season believing it has both a veteran capable of competing now and a promising young quarterback continuing to develop behind the scenes. That approach requires patience from everyone involved, coaches, players, executives, and especially fans, but it would allow the Browns to avoid rushing a decision before they believe it's necessary. No matter which path the Browns choose, Andrew Berry and Kevin Stefanski understand that their credibility will be tied to the outcome. Quarterback decisions define NFL front offices more than almost any other move they make. If they remain committed to Watson and he succeeds, they'll be praised for staying patient during difficult circumstances. If they eventually transition to Sanders and he develops into a franchise quarterback, they'll receive credit for recognizing the right moment to turn the page. But if the evaluation proves incorrect, criticism will follow for years because quarterback choices rarely fade from public memory. That's why preseason football feels unusually important this year. Normally, exhibition games are about evaluating roster depth and helping young players gain experience. For Cleveland, every series played by the quarterbacks will become part of a much larger conversation. Analysts will study mechanics, decision-making, leadership,
timing, and chemistry with teammates. Fans will celebrate every touchdown and overreact to every interception. Every performance will be treated as another clue pointing toward the Browns' ultimate decision, even though coaches often evaluate far more than the final stat line. The fascinating part is that the organization doesn't have to make a permanent decision after one preseason game or even one regular season week. Quarterback development isn't always linear, and circumstances can change quickly throughout an NFL season. Injuries happen, momentum shifts, players improve, veterans rediscover their rhythm, and young quarterbacks continue learning. The Browns know that flexibility may become one of their greatest advantages if they resist making emotional decisions based solely on public reaction. Still, one thing is undeniable: Cleveland has reached a crossroads. The franchise is balancing the weight of a historic financial commitment with the excitement surrounding one of its most intriguing young quarterbacks. Every practice, every meeting, and every preseason snap moves the organization one step closer to a decision that could influence not only this season, but the next several years. Whether that decision ultimately proves brilliant or becomes another chapter in the Browns' long search for quarterback stability will only be answered once the games begin. And perhaps that's what makes this story so compelling. For months, the NFL has been debating possibilities, analyzing rumors, and imagining different outcomes. Soon, speculation will give way to reality. The Browns won't be judged by offseason headlines or viral practice clips. They'll be judged by victories, losses, and the quarterback they trust to lead them when the games finally count. Only then will we discover whether Cleveland stayed the course, embraced a new direction, or found a balance that very few people saw coming.